Hey everyone, Scott here again. So today let's take some of those photos from La Jolla and do a little processing. So the last time I had taken you out to La Jolla and showed you a couple of the compositions I was working with, so I thought it'd be nice to take those into the computer and do a little processing on them and show you what came out. So let's get over to the machine and start going.
Okay, so here are some of the shots that I took that evening out in La Jolla. And actually, let me show you, I'll show all of the photos because I took a whole lot. And you can see many of these with this little X. I've just rejected them outright as they were either just weren't all that interesting or underexposed, or you can see quite a number of bracketed shots in here. I do that mainly to make sure I get the exposure. Yeah, but I hung around for quite a bit of time waiting for the sun to go all the way down under the horizon, and even hung around afterward to see if any color would come into the sky, and that really just didn't happen. So I whittled this all down to these shots that we see here, and I thought today I will process this one. I think that one looks pretty nice. It's a pretty good starting point. And let's see, what have I done in this particular image here? I basically have just done a little bit of retouching, and that was for some dust spots through the sky. I've took care of some chromatic aberration that was very evident at the edges of my photo. This particular lens, I've used it enough. I know that it's not the best when it comes to aberrations, and there was quite a bit at the dark contrast edges of the rocks versus the water and sky. And I've done a little bit of a adjustment in the exposure, a very gentle S curve, and I can just toggle this really quickly. This is what came out of the camera, and this is just the subtle adjustments that I've made within Aperture. So I'm going to send this into the Perfect Photo Suite and give it some stylization. All right, here we are in the Perfect Photo Suite. Got my Smart Layer turned on, so let's bring this up into the Effects module and do some stylizing on it. So I've played around with this image, and I thought what I would do is I saved a preset for it. So I'm going to open that up here in my sandbox, and I played around with a couple of different treatments on it. Same image, different treatments. And I liked how my second effort looked at when all said and done. So let's take a look at this preset, and I'll unwind it and walk through what I changed. So you can see here's the final image. Here's what we started with. So quite a bit of change happening. So let me walk through what looks like a pretty large set of changes here. I'm going to do a Command 1, which is just going to hide that thumbnail, so we have a little more screen real estate here to work with. So I started with dynamic contrast. That's generally where I begin with most, if not all, of my images. And when I'm working with a landscape that has a bright section of sky like this that I don't want to get too crunchy, I'll play with the blending modes. And so the first dynamic contrast is just being applied to the shadows. And then I fiddled with the sliders here to get the detail at the level that I wanted. Then moved on to another dynamic contrast, this time just being applied to the midtones. And once again, fiddled with the sliders. Now the sky started to get too defined, so I dropped a masking bug at the horizon to remove that effect from the sky. And so this contrast here is really only affecting the ocean and the rocks. You can toggle that off and on. You can see that's where the change is. Moving into color, use the color enhancer to warm up the photo a bit. You hide the blending options. So I increased the temperature a little bit, and then boosted some vibrance and saturation to give more color and more orange tones to the sunset. They were certainly there when I was on scene. The camera didn't capture it as I remembered it. One thing to note is when I did the mask here, I dropped the horizon of the mask below the horizon, the natural horizon, because these orange tones, if they're in the sky, they're going to be reflecting in the water as well. And so you don't want to have a a cut right at the horizon edge. That's just not going to look natural, and subconsciously our brains will reject that. Moved on to an adjustable gradient, and really there the primary thing was to tone down the brightness of the sky. You can see again I've got that horizon line of the mask set below the natural horizon, and boosted the warmth some and added some glow, so these clouds become a little more ethereal. When I got to this point, I added another adjustable gradient, because this really looks dark now, this area of the rocks. When I darkened the sky, the optical illusion is, well, that corner's gotten darker too. It hasn't in reality, but just the overall scene is making it seem that way to our eyes. So grabbed another gradient tool, added it to the image, and boosted the brightness just a little bit. Rotated this around so it's only being applied to this corner here. All right, then had some fun with tone. I wanted more detail, so this next tone enhancer does just that. It adds detail to the whole scene, and not a ton. I started with this tonal contrast preset, and that adds a ton of detail. And then from there, backed off. Oops, let me undo that. I want to mess up my my preset there. Let's see, go here, and well, I'll just redo it for you. We had the detail up at about 30, like that, and then let me reset that curve. Start with this again. We had the detail around 30, and I just did a very gentle S curve, so that you get a little more definition and separation of the shadows and the highlights. Tone enhancer again. Now this is where some of that magic happens. See that color shift in the scene overall? And this is playing with these tone curves. This is all subtle stuff. I mean, all the sliders are nominal, just didn't change them at all. It's just playing with the tone curve in the individual channels. So the reds in the highlights section, so the way you read this is these are the darks, these are the lights, these are the darks, these are the lights, so pure shadows, pure highlights. So this quadrant is dealing with your highlights, and I boosted the reds a little bit. The way you adjust this is just clicking a point and dragging it up or down. I've got a series of videos on the tone enhancer. You can take a look for them on my site, on my YouTube channel. You'll find them there. Also played around with the green, tugged it down just a little bit, and that's what really introduced that nice purplish twilight tone to the sky. And then for the blues, another slight tug upward, just an overall, give me a little more blues curve. And finishing it off, a motion blur. So here's the blur filter using a radial type, and so the edges are shooting in and give that feeling of motion. I took the center point and set it right at the sun, and then you can see the shape of this bug. We're not doing any blur here at all, and then there's a huge filter that goes feather that goes all the way out to the edge, and I reduce the opacity of that mask so that it's not a full-blown harsh type of radial blur. And then for this bug, this is to remove everything from the bottom. We don't want any type of motion or radial blur in the ocean or in the rocks. That makes no sense. They wouldn't be moving like that. It's only for the clouds. So we end up with a mask that looks like this. And the last touch of vignette, using the technique. If you've bought my book, I cover it in there. Manipulating these sliders so that the vignette is only being put where you want it. In my case, I mainly wanted it in the corners, more so in the sky, less so in the upper and lower corners. And that's the finished product. So once more time, before and after.
You got a brief glimpse of another photo or another processing on the same photo I did. Let me show that to you here as well. And you can see that really just depending on your mood or depending on what your style is for that day as things change, you can get a very different look and feel from the same photo with just different processing. So play around, experiment, try different things, poke sliders in various ways, pick a preset you've never used before, and just have fun. I hope you found this interesting. If you like it, again, please leave a comment, shoot me a message through the website, and I'll be back again soon.